Montana Territory, 1878. The wind carried the scent of pine and ash as Levi Rourke reined in his horse at the edge of a clearing scarred by fire and blood. The wagon had been turned over, one wheel split clean through. Smoke still curled from the burned canvas, and the ground was littered with broken crates and dark stains. He saw no bodies, but the violence was plain. Bandits. Maybe Cheyenne raiders, maybe outlaws hard to tell without more signs. Either way, whoever had been here was either taken or dead. He was about to turn back when he saw movement near the tree line. A figure stumbled out barefoot, dress torn, long hair tangled with pine needles and ash. She looked no older than 20. She staggered, blinked at him like he was a ghost, then dropped to her knees in the dirt. Levi swung down from his saddle in a flash and crossed to her. "Miss, are you hurt?" She looked up, her eyes wide and wet. I do not know," she whispered. Her lip was split. Blood dried along her temple, but it was her eyes that got him. Green, glassy, searching. She flinched when he touched her shoulder but did not pull away. "What is your name?" he asked gently. She opened her mouth, then paused. Her eyes darted around trees, smoke, the wreckage, and back to his face. "I do not remember," she said in a small voice. Levi crouched in front of her. "Do you remember anything?" She shook her head slowly, then stopped, her brow furrowed. "Only you, me." He blinked. "I remember your face," she said, voice trembling. "Just your face." Levi stared at her, heart thudding. He had never seen her before in his life. But the way she looked at him, it was like he was the only thing keeping her from crumbling. "All right," he said softly, brushing a leaf from her hair. "You are safe now." He got her on his horse, wrapped his coat around her shoulders, and rode slow back to his cabin tucked deep in the valley, 3 miles from town. Her hands clung to his shirt the whole ride. The next morning she sat on the edge of his cot, watching the fire lick at the stove. Her hair was clean now, braided loosely down her back. She wore an old flannel shirt of his that hung past her knees. When he handed her a plate of eggs and bacon, she whispered, "Thank you," like the words were new in her mouth. "You sure you do not remember anything?" "Your name, where you were going," she shook her head. "It is all gone, just flashes, a broken wheel, a scream." "Then you—" "I have seen wagon attacks before," he said quietly. "You are lucky to be alive." She looked up at him. "Did you save me?" "No," he said. "I found you after." She nodded, like that made sense somehow. "Then maybe I was meant to find you." He tried not to let that hit too deep. "Well, until someone comes looking for you, you can stay here." "I want to help," she said quickly. "I can cook, clean, mend things. I do not want to just sit and wait." "All right," he said, watching her closely. "But you need a name." She smiled, shy. "Willow," she said. "That feels right." "Willow," he repeated. It suited her. Days passed. Then a week. Willow took to the cabin life easily. She swept the porch, gathered eggs from his hens, and sang under her breath as she folded laundry. Her memory never returned, but her strength grew. She laughed more. She would sit with Levi on the porch in the evenings, drinking coffee and watching the sun sink behind the pine ridge. One night, as a storm rolled in, she stood by the window and whispered, "You built all this yourself?" "After the war," Levi said, setting another log on the fire. "Needed somewhere quiet." "You live alone?" He hesitated. "Yes." "No wife?" "No." She turned toward him. "Why not?" He met her eyes. "Never found someone who made this place feel full." She watched him for a long second. "It feels full now." He looked away, throat tight. 2 more weeks passed. Then one afternoon, while Willow was picking wild strawberries by the creek, a rider came thundering down the trail. Levi stepped outside, rifle in hand, as a deputy from town dismounted. "Levi," the man said, panting. "Bandits hit another wagon 3 days back." "Same description. We tracked them to a canyon north of here. Sheriff is gathering men. Figured you might want in." Levi glanced back toward the cabin where Willow was just returning with her basket. Her eyes were on him, unreadable. He nodded. "I will be there." That night, as he packed his rifle and gear, Willow stood in the doorway. "You are going after them." "I have to," he said, "if they are the same ones who hurt you." She crossed the room quickly and wrapped her arms around him. "Be careful, Levi." He closed his eyes, holding her tight. "I will come back to you." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "You promise?" "I promise." Then she kissed him. It was soft, hesitant, and warm. Her fingers trembled against his jaw. He kissed her back, slow and sure, like he had been waiting for her since the day he built that cabin. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "I do not know my past, Levi, but I know I want my future with you." He cupped her face. "Then I will come back and we will build it together." He rode out before dawn. Willow stood in the doorway, wrapped in his coat, watching him disappear into the trees. Her fingers still tingled from the feel of his lips. Her heart ached with something fierce and real. She did not know who she used to be, but she knew what she was now. His. The rain came down steady and cold the morning Levi returned. His coat clung to him, soaked through, and mud clung to his boots and the hem of his trousers. He didn't dismount right away. Just sat in the saddle a while, shoulders slumped, hat low over his face. Willow stepped out onto the porch barefoot, her hands still damp from washing linens. She didn't speak, only moved down the steps and took the reins in silence. Levi let her lead the horse toward the lean-to, his gaze never lifting from the wet ground. Inside, the firewood she'd stacked neatly the day before burned low in the stove. She set out one of the quilts to warm him and stirred the stew she'd started that morning, though her hands shook. When he finally came in, he moved stiffly, like every step cost him something. "I didn't get them all," he said at last, voice rough. Willow looked up from the fire. "You came back." "They had a camp tucked in the canyon. We rode in before dawn. 2 of them made it out. Sheriff said he'd keep searching." He paused, dropped onto the bench beside the stove. "They had things from the first wagon, a child's bonnet, part of a letter, but nothing with names." She sat across from him. "Did you recognize any of it?" "No." His hand curled around the edge of the bench. "They took everything and burned the rest, whoever you were traveling with." "They're gone." She nodded once, eyes on the fire. "I felt it already." He looked up at her then. "You still don't remember anything, only that I woke up and your face was the first thing I saw." She stood, crossed the room, and knelt to unlace his boots. "And that I wasn't afraid." He let her, though he kept his eyes on the wall. "I worried you might not want me back. I waited every day, sat by the window when the wind changed. You said you'd return." She tugged off his wet coat and laid it by the fire. "And I believed you." That night after supper, he lit the oil lamp and unwrapped a bundle from his saddlebag. Inside was a length of blue calico, faded but clean. "I found this near the creek where they camped," he said. "It looked like something you might have worn." She ran her fingers across the fabric. "I don't remember it." Then, softer, "But it's kind of you to bring it." Levi leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You ever wonder what kind of folks you came from?" "I try not to," she said. "Sometimes I think if I knew, I'd feel torn between 2 lives. As it is, I only want this one." He didn't answer right away. The rain tapped at the windows, steady as a heartbeat. "I've been thinking of building a second room," he said after a while. "For what?" she asked, folding the cloth slowly. He shifted in his chair. "You've been sleeping by the stove. That's not right." She looked at him, brow lifted slightly. "You planning on moving there instead?" His mouth twitched, but he didn't smile. "I was thinking maybe we could make it a room for both of us." Willow stood, walked over and rested her hand on his shoulder. "You're not asking out of obligation." Levi caught her wrist gently. I'm asking because I've never felt steadier than I do when you're near." She bent down, pressed her lips to his temple. "Then build it." The next day, he started clearing the stones behind the cabin. She brought him water and watched from the doorway. Arms folded, hair tied off her neck with a scrap of muslin. There was no blueprint, no drawn plans, just the rhythm of hammer and saw, the low murmur of his voice when he needed her help, and the way he paused sometimes to glance back and make sure she was still there. By the time the frame stood, the last of the snow had melted from the ridge, and the first dogwood blossoms had begun to open. Willow stood inside the half-built room, hands on her hips. "It'll be warm in winter," she said. He leaned against the doorframe, wiping his brow with the back of his arm. "And cool in summer." She turned to him. "You ever thought about planting something out back?" He nodded. "I was thinking beans, maybe some squash." "I'll work the soil," she said. "You handle the fence." He picked up a board, shouldered it. "We'll need a root cellar by fall." Willow stepped close. "Then we'd best stay put a while." Levi looked down at her, eyes steady. "I don't plan on going anywhere." She reached up and touched the scar at his collarbone, a pale mark she'd noticed when washing his shirt one morning. "You've carried so much alone." He caught her hand. "Not anymore." They stood there a long while in the quiet frame of the room that would soon be theirs, the breeze stirring sawdust around their boots, the scent of pine and earth thick in the spring air. Neither of them spoke again that afternoon. They didn't need to. The work would wait a few hours longer. So would the future. But both were coming and both could be trusted, just like everything else they were building, slow, steady, and lasting. By midsummer, the new room stood finished, 4 walls of pine sealed tight against the coming cold, a narrow window overlooking the slope where Levi had started planting beans in crooked, stubborn rows. The bed they'd built together from cedar logs creaked faintly when touched, not from weakness, but from honest work. Willow had sewn muslin curtains from old feed sacks, their edges embroidered with tiny vines she stitched in the evenings. The room smelled of wood smoke and sage. It smelled like home. One morning, as dawn broke pale over the ridge, Willow stepped out with a tin pail and paused at the sight across the field, 2 riders on the far edge, just silhouettes beyond the cottonwoods. She watched them a long while, her fingers tightening around the handle. They didn't approach, just turned east and vanished into the trees. When Levi returned that evening from checking the far fence line, she met him before he reached the porch. "There were men watching the cabin," she said. "2 of them. They didn't come close." He didn't ask what they looked like. He didn't ask if she was sure. "Pack a bag," he said. "Just in case." That night, she folded the blanket from the cot by the stove, pressed dried apples into a flour sack, and tucked the tin of coins Levi kept beneath the floorboard into her satchel. When he came in, he handed her a small pistol wrapped in linen. "I'd rather you never need it," he said, "but if you do, it's yours." She didn't argue, just took it and set it beside her things. They didn't sleep much. Instead, they sat on the porch, knees nearly touching, and listened to the wind move through the ryegrass. "You think they were part of it?" she asked. "I don't know." "I didn't feel afraid," she added. "Not like before." Levi looked at her, eyes shadowed in the lantern light. "You've changed." "So have you," he nodded once. "I don't want to leave this place, Willow, but if it comes to it, I'll ride with you." She reached for his hand. "I'd ride anywhere if it's with you." The next day, they went to town. It had been nearly a month since Willow had last seen the streets of Elk Bend. The general store's bell still hung crooked, and the smell of horses and tobacco clung to the air. But people watched her differently now, curious, uncertain. A few nodded politely. One woman muttered something under her breath and turned away. Willow kept her chin up. Inside the store, Levi traded 2 pelts for salt and coffee. Willow wandered the shelves until a voice stopped her. "You've been here before." She turned. A man in a canvas vest leaned against the counter, eyes narrowed. "I don't believe so." "You look like someone I knew," he said. "Before the war." Willow studied him. His face sparked nothing in her. "I'm sorry." Levi stepped between them. "We're finished here," he said. "Come on, Willow." Outside, she asked, "Do you think he really knew me?" "Doesn't matter," Levi said. "He won't again." They rode back slow, the wagon creaking beneath sacks of flour and seed. Near the last bend, Willow touched his arm. "I want to learn to shoot proper." He looked over. "You sure?" "I don't want to be helpless." They spent the next morning by the creek where the trees grew thick and the sound wouldn't carry. Levi set up bottles on a fallen log and handed her the pistol. "It'll kick," he warned. She squared her shoulders. "So do I." The first shot went wild. The second clipped the bark. By the sixth, she cracked the neck of a bottle clean. Levi lowered his arms, watching her. "You're steady." She holstered the pistol. "I had a good teacher." That night she lay beside him, the window open to the stars. Her voice was quiet. "What if someone does come for me? What if I remember something I can't live with?" Levi didn't answer right away. Then he turned, brushing her hair back from her face. "Whatever you were, whatever you lost, it didn't break you. And it won't scare me off." She reached for his hand beneath the quilt. "It's strange," she whispered. "I don't remember my name, but I remember how it feels to be safe, with you." He kissed her slow, like the world outside could wait its turn. When they fell asleep, the pistol rested beneath the floorboard. The beans unfurled their first green shoots in the garden, and the wind carried no scent of smoke. Whatever lay behind them stayed there for now, but they were ready if it came again. Together. The wind carried the scent of juniper and dry earth as August settled over the valley. The garden behind the cabin had taken hold. Neat rows of squash vines curling around stakes Willow had sharpened herself. Each dawn brought with it the soft rustle of green, the hum of bees over blossoms, and the rhythmic creak of the water pump Levi had repaired with a length of wire and a steady hand. He was mending the gate when she came down the slope from the ridge, her skirt's dusty hair tucked beneath a straw hat. She held a bundle wrapped in muslin and a look in her eyes that made him straighten before she spoke. "There's a grave up there," she said. "Old. Stone set careful but no carving." Levi set the hammer down. "Fresh? No, years gone by the look of it. But someone returned not long ago. I found tobacco laid at the base." He wiped his hands on his trousers. "You think it's connected to what happened?" "I don't know." She unwrapped the cloth. Inside were 3 carved buttons, worn smooth. They were tucked in the grass nearby. "I thought maybe they came from me, but I don't recognize them." He turned one over in his palm. "Could be nothing. Or someone's trying to call back the dead." He watched her for a breath, then nodded toward the porch. "Come sit. You've been walking half the morning." She hesitated, then followed. They sat in the shade, cicadas droning in the distance. Levi leaned back, one boot resting on the other knee, and studied her. "You ever wish you could go looking? For answers, I mean." "I used to," she said, "but I've seen what comes from digging too deep." He nodded slowly. "You've got a steady way about you." "Took me years to find that." "You were a soldier," she said. "You learned to carry things quiet." He didn't look at her. "I did things during the war I don't speak of," he said. "Not proud, but I reckon I made peace with most of it." She ran her thumb along the edge of the muslin. "I wonder if I had to make peace with anything." "You've got a stillness in you," he said, "but it's not hollow. That tells me you faced something and came through it." She looked out across the field. "The men who came before, they didn't return." "No. But their kind doesn't forget easy." "I'm not afraid of them. You should be." She turned to him. "I'm not." That night she lay awake beside him, listening to the owl's call from the trees. His breathing was steady, one arm resting across her waist. She moved her fingers lightly over his forearm, tracing the old scar that cut across the muscle. "Did you lose someone?" she asked. He was quiet a long time. "Before the war, I had a brother. Younger. Loud. Couldn't sit still to save his life. He joined up the same year I did. Different regiment. I got word he'd been caught in Kansas. Never found his body." She turned toward him. "You never speak of him." "I buried him in my mind a long time ago, but I think of him when I see young men riding through town with more pride than sense." She pressed her forehead to his chest. "I'm sorry." He kissed the top of her head and didn't say more. By the end of the week, the beans were climbing higher and the squash had begun to fruit. Willow knelt in the dirt each morning, pulling weeds, careful not to disturb the roots. Levi had taken to riding the western boundary of the property more often, eyes scanning the tree line, rifle always slung across his saddle. One afternoon, he returned with a length of torn fabric caught on a branch. "Check the perimeter," he said. "Found this southeast, near the creek bend." She ran her fingers over the cloth. It was oilskin, the kind often used to wrap rifles against weather. No markings, but the edge was frayed as if torn in haste. "Still think they're watching?" she asked. "I know they are." She folded the strip and tucked it into the box beneath the bed, beside the buttons. Later that evening, she sat at the table with a sheet of parchment and a stub of charcoal. Levi came in, dust still clinging to his boots, and watched her sketch. "What's that?" "I've been trying to remember my handwriting," she said. "If I can remember how I write, maybe I'll remember what I wrote." He picked up the page. The letters were uneven, hesitant. A few words repeated: river, 3, ash. Anything means something, only feelings. "I write ash and I feel heat. River and I feel cold, that's all." "You're building something piece by piece." She looked up at him. "It's strange. I don't know where I came from, but I know I want to stay." He nodded. "Then we'll make sure you can." Before bed, she walked to the edge of the porch and stood barefoot in the cooling dirt. The moon hung low, casting faint silver across the field. Levi joined her, silent beside her for a long time. "You think they'll come?" she asked. "If they do," he said, "they won't find you alone." She turned and reached for his hand. They stood that way until the wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of distant smoke, faint but real. They didn't speak of it, just turned together and went inside. The smoke came from a camp no more than half a mile southeast of their boundary, tucked behind a stand of cottonwood where the creek ran shallow and slow. Levi found it just after first light, when the sun cast long, clear shadows and the dew had yet to lift from the grass. The fire was cold. Whoever had sat there had moved on, but not far, he could tell by the tracks. 2 horses, one leading a third. No wagon. No sign of a permanent stay. He knelt, brushing his fingers along a scuffed patch of earth. A boot heel had caught there, turned sharply as if someone had stumbled. Not a hunter, not a trapper. Someone traveling on purpose but unsure of the way. When he returned to the cabin late that morning, Willow was in the root cellar, laying out slices of apple to dry across a plank shelf. The scent of the fruit clung to the air, sweet and close. "They're circling," he said once she climbed out, wiping dust from her skirt. She didn't ask who. "They're not rushing in," she said. "What are they waiting for?" "Maybe for you to remember," he said, "or maybe for me to leave again." She leaned her hip against the porch rail. "Then we don't give them either." That night, Levi bolted the front and back doors and loaded the rifle with practiced hands, but it was Willow who drew the curtains and poured water into the basin. She moved without hesitation, like someone who'd already decided not to run. "I want to be baptized," she said suddenly. As he banked the fire for the night, he turned. "What brought that on?" "I want a beginning I can choose, not the one I lost," she said. "I want to stand in the river and come up with a name I give myself." He studied her, then gave a slow nod. There's a preacher out by Fish Creek. Used to ride circuit, but he still holds service when folks gather. I don't want a service, she said. Just truth. They rode out 2 days later. The preacher, a man in his 60s with a crooked gait and a voice like gravel, didn't ask questions. He led them to the river bend behind his cabin and stood with hands folded while Willow stepped barefoot into the water. It reached her waist, and she didn't flinch at the cold. I don't carry a name from before, she said, eyes steady on Levi. But I choose to be Willow Rourke, because where I've landed matters more than where I began. The preacher dipped her beneath the current. When she came up, Levi was already stepping into the water beside her. He didn't speak, just took her hands. They returned home at dusk. The field was undisturbed, the porch just as they left it. But the gate hung open, swinging faintly in the breeze. Levi drew his rifle. Willow slipped behind him, her hand on the pistol at her hip. Inside, nothing had been taken, but the wooden box beneath their bed had been opened. The carved buttons were missing. He shut the lid with care. They want you to chase them, he said. Willow nodded once. Then we won't. They didn't leave the property again that summer. Instead, they made the cabin theirs in quiet ways. He carved her name into the lintel above the door, and she planted yellow flowers along the edge of the path. At night, they spoke of building a smokehouse, of trading eggs for a proper stovepipe, of maybe raising a pair of milk goats if they could fence the south pasture come spring. One morning in early September, a letter arrived from the sheriff's office. It was hand-delivered by a ranch hand passing through. Levi opened it at the table while Willow peeled potatoes. 2 men caught near the border to the Dakota Territory, he said. Matching descriptions. One had a rifle with initials carved into the stock, WR. Willow didn't stop peeling. What'll happen to them? Territory law, Levi said. They'll be tried and hanged if found guilty. She set the knife down. Then we won't hear from them again. No, she crossed the room and reached for his hand. Then we can start. That night, they lay beneath the quilt she'd stitched from worn shirts and old flour sacks, the wind rising through the pines outside. She traced the line of his collarbone, her breath warm against his throat. I never thought I'd earn peace, she said. You didn't earn it, he said. You built it. He kissed her like it was the first time and the last and every moment in between. When dawn came, it found them tangled together in the hush of their home, the world outside quiet at last. Years passed. Children came, 2 boys and a girl, born strong and wild-hearted. Levi built a cradle from the same cedar he'd used for their bed. Willow taught them to walk the ridge paths without leaving signs, to read the wind, to sit still and listen. She never spoke of the fire or the wagon or the men who vanished from the trail. But her children grew up knowing how to stand their ground and when to hold their silence. The cabin grew, room by room. A porch on the back, a loft above the kitchen, a smokehouse by the garden. The flowers she'd planted that first spring returned each year without fail. Levi grew silver at the temples, and Willow's hair turned the color of snow, but her eyes never changed. They remained green as the riverbank, clear as the sky after rain. They never left the valley. They didn't need to. And on quiet evenings, when the fields shimmered gold with late sun and the children's laughter echoed from the trees, Levi would set down his tools and take Willow's hand, and she would smile in that way that told him, without words, that she remembered the life they'd made not from what they'd escaped, but from what they'd chosen. Together, always,